As the security leadership role has evolved, as has its balance of needs and wants and requirements, being a CISO isn't for everybody. You know, when I talk to people and I say, what's your career aspirations? They go, I want to be a CISO. And I say, be careful what you wish for. CISOs can be quite expensive, you know, it's a high salary role, but you're paying for years of experience and knowledge and yada yada. I'm just selling us.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Paul.
Be honest with yourself, what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah, be honest with yourself. It's not for everybody. That said, I love it. I absolutely love it. By the way, just you'll find this amusing, and I know the listeners won't be able to see this, but that's my escape over my shoulder. I've started, it might be a midlife crisis, but I've started to learn to DJ.
Oh, wow.
There we go.
Because I like, you know, music is my thing, and I love watching how people do this, and I thought, how hard can it be? I need to learn. That's my escape.
Welcome to Reinvent Security, the podcast where we look at ways of doing information security that actually works, and respectfully calling out those practices proven not to be fit for purpose. I am Irfan Santu, a information security executive. I'm the OS chapter leader, a book author, public speaker on information security, and I'm extremely passionate about solving the information security problem. I'm here today with my dear friend and co-host of the podcast, Jeroen Prinsen.
Thank you, Irfan. My name is Jeroen Prinsen. I'm a freelance Chief Information Security Officer, currently working for the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center, and I'm a public speaker. I've nearly 2 decades of experience in the field of information security.
Today's episode, we're going to talk about something, and I want to make a parallel, right? So I'm pretty sure that most of our listeners have heard about NextGen firewalls. It sounds like it's a new thing. You know, the oldest thing that we had in information security were firewalls, antiviruses. But nowadays, we're talking about next-gen firewalls. Well, today, in our conversation, we're going to take it the next level. We're going to talk about the NextGen CISOs. And to do this, we have the perfect guest on the matter. We have Paul Watts. A big welcome to you. It's absolutely a true pleasure to have you joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, and it's absolutely fantastic to be here.
You have over 28 years of experience in the field of information security and technology, and you're now a distinguished analyst at the Information Security Forum, ISF. It's on your shirt, I can see that. You have a proven record as a Chief Information Security Officer at companies like Domino, Pizza, Kantar, Network Rail, and you're on a mission to help businesses and society embrace and enjoy the digital world while remaining safe and secure. So, Paul, I'll give it to you to add to this introduction in your own work. Tell us about the work you are doing in the field of information security, especially on the NextGen CISO.
Absolutely. And, you know, thanks again for having me on. And, I mean, you've got that right. You know, we are all on a mission to try and make the digital world safe and secure and enjoy it at the same time. And I'm delighted to be working with the Information Security Forum, which is a 34 years young, member-owned organisation, transcends the globe. And our aspiration is to, you know, support all of us through research and advisory tools and methodologies, professional services, and we're championing the cause of what we call better cybersecurity. And I've been working with them actually for over 12 years, both as a member and now, as you say, a distinguished analyst. And the reason why they hired me is to place a focus on us, the security leaders in the room. And I've been working on an insights series of research looking at the role of security leadership. And I should probably just say at this point, you don't have to be a CISO to be a security leader. So when I talk about security leaders, I am being inclusive about directors of cybersecurity, business information security officers, the traditional chief information security officers, head of information security. There are multiple roles, but we all have one thing in common. We are trying to lead and champion the cause of information security. And actually, some of that ambiguity is probably something we'll touch on a little bit later on. So I'm looking at how the role has evolved over the years, the challenges that we're still facing into, and examining what needs to change, as you say, next generation, in order for us to remain valuable to our business. And that's actually a really, really important word, value, because we've moved past a world where security is just about ticking boxes on a spreadsheet and walking around with clipboards. You know, the potential that we bring to our organisations is way beyond just fostering a culture of compliance. And as I said to you earlier, as you know, I was in Helsinki yesterday. You know, I get the opportunity, fantastic opportunity, to travel the world, meeting fellow security leaders, talking to boards and business leaders about their challenges, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, and talking about how we balance that equation. And it is an equation. We talk about cost management, risk management, business agility, regulation, control. All of these things drive outcome. And that's what we have to remember. It's kind of all about the outcome. That's kind of what I'm up to at the moment.
Yeah, excellent. And thank you so much for pointing that out, Paul, because completely agree with you. We forget those people that are not at, I would say, an executive position or leadership, but they are still leaders. And we still need those fellows, those folks to help us drive the information security agenda to change organizations, be more resilient. So, you know, this is the Reinvent Security podcast, Paul. You know, it is almost like a tradition, a 3 episodes old tradition now. So we're going to ask you that question. Share with us those moments in your personal and professional life that supported reinventing you, Paul.
Wow, what a great question. And I've been thinking about this because you did have you were kind enough to say, I'm going to ask this question. So I have been thinking about this. Yeah. There were 3 things, I think, that stick in my mind. And the first one is this. So I actually started my career, not as a security leader. I didn't even work in information security. But I started in business intelligence and data warehousing consultancy with a bit of operations research and statistics to the side. So I always was a data nerd by the looks of it, and that notion of, you know, the value and importance and significance of data has been something that's really, really stuck with me. You know, I always use this kind of analogy as if you think about data as the blood, and the body and the organs of the body are the entity that do amazing things with that blood to power us and drive us forward and, you know, enable us to do great things and sometimes, you know, not great things. And without the blood, the body serves no real purpose. And if you think about that in the context of data and IT, you know, that kind of analogy works as well. You know, you can spend a lot of money on the tin, but you've got to be thinking about what it is you're trying to do with that data. What is it that those computers, those servers, those cloud environments are trying to do? So that's something that's really kind of stuck with me. And I keep coming back to that, especially now as we have moved into a very significant and thriving data and digital economy. That is something I do come back to. So that was number one. The second one that struck me was actually in my second CISO security leader engagement. I was working in the retail sector. And what struck me was something quite important, which is no 2 organisations are created the same. And you only really understand that by living this. So in my first CISO gig, I had a much easier life in hindsight. It was a very compliance-orientated world. It was financial services. Yeah. And things came a lot easier to me as a consequence because it wasn't, you know, these things just had to be done or we couldn't be who we wanted to be. They were the rules. You know, there was no negotiating that. And when I switched sectors and I ended up in the retail sector, that was like being hit in the face by a frying pan because I then realised that things didn't come as easy to me as they used to. And what I realised then was something that I think a lot of security leaders have that moment of epiphany and realise this. Actually, I need to sell. I need to market. I need to make people want me, want security. And what that does is opens up some cracks in your portfolio of skills. You know, a lot of us came from a very technical background and we're very competent in that space. But when you move into that softer, squidgier side, we have to talk to people who aren't technical, you realise that you've got some challenges there. And one of the things that struck me is my formative consultancy days when I was working in business intelligence and data warehousing is unbeknownst to me, had equipped me with some of the basic skills that I needed. Learn the customer, listen to the customer, ask open questions, match the pitch of the stakeholder, and then provide solutions that ease their pain and support their outcome. And yeah, of course, we do still need to have those difficult conversations about rules and compliance and so on and so forth, and holding that firm and fair line is important. But yeah, we're marketeers, closet marketeers, who knew? And then the final one kind of plays on that a little bit as well. And it was actually observing my late father. And he he absolutely despised computers. I mean, the conversations we used to have at home about, you know, I won't use the expletives he used, but he just thought they were a fad. He just thought they were something that was just going to be fashionable and then they would go away again. My dad was a petrol head. He was a motor mechanic, man and boy, did it for well over 40 years. And eventually in that career, he succumbed to white-collar work and he absolutely hated it. You know, when he had a bad day being a white-collar worker, he would sneak off to one of the depots and take a van out and go and do breakdowns again because that's what his passion was. And for most of his working life, you know, that's what he did. You know, that was his passion, fixing cars, speaking to the public. But the one thing that he did really, really well that I kind of picked up on and he didn't even know he was doing was how to read a situation and read the person. His emotional intelligence was off the scale. You know, he could be working in central London, fixing a taxi, talking to a Cockney Barrow boy, you know, very one language and rapport. And then the next he was at Buckingham Palace fixing a vehicle belonging to the aristocracy. And that's actually a true story. And he used to match his pitch, his tone and his approach used to adapt dynamically to suit the audience. And what that gave him was this immediate rapport and this ability to engage with a member who was, you know, they're broken down, they can't get where they want to go, so they're frustrated. And, you know, he understood that, he empathized with that, and he said, well, I can help you fix that. And that's what he did. And that skill is so vitally important to security leaders. And it's something that's stuck with me and it's served me well. And it's something I tell security leaders that I've coached, you know, in the past, that your emotional intelligence is such a valuable, powerful tool. And they look back at me quizzically and go, no, surely it's about risk and compliance. And I said, no, it really, really isn't. And trust me on that. So they're kind of the three things I think that kind of shaped my career and who I am, really.
It's super recognizable for me. So thank you for this, Paul. But you just said we are closet marketeers, right?
Yeah.
Is exactly what I experienced during my transition from the financial sector, which is quite compliance driven.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And their like attitude towards security and risk is all from a compliance perspective. We need to comply. So there's no like real risk tolerance or innovation happening because of that compliance, versus now where I'm the CISO of the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center, which was a huge culture shock for me because now I work with like 350, 400 people that are in the field of security. So every direction that I'm taking the organization, they understand it. I don't have to sell it. It's really, I would say, enlightening that everybody understands security, but that comes with the downside of a lot of questions, like a lot of relevant security questions because they understand it. And because of the enormous security knowledge that they have, they're also pretty risk averse versus like compliance or other sectors. So I'm experiencing now that as a CISO, I need to encourage them sometimes to take risk, which is quite different. And to me, while you were explaining this, I realized, or at least you made me rethink again that every organization
has its own context, of course.
Its own context,
where
but
you
also
as a CISO have to play a role.
Yeah, but also requires a different CISO, right? So I think that the type of CISO in a financial organization is different than, for example, the CISO in, I don't know, chip manufacturing, like ASML or NXP or you name it, or maybe Domino's or, a government sector. Do you see this as well, Paul, the type of CISOs?
I do. I've just finished work on a third paper, which is looking at the future of security leadership, which is why this is a fantastic conversation to be having. And I started looking at the different types of CISOs, different characteristics, and I've realised that no two organisations are the same. I think you're absolutely right with that. But equally, no two types of CISO are the same. So you can have a security leader that's very technical. You can have a post-breach CISO that's very much about refortifying and building fences and getting the organisation stabilised. You can have the transformational CISO that's maybe presiding over a programme of mergers, acquisitions, and divestments, and all of these different things kind of come back to outcome, right? And that's where a lot of security leaders, certainly in the early days of their tenures and careers, get it very wrong. And I spoke to one chap about this actually, and he said, maybe I got lucky. My first CISO gig, I just nailed it. I got it right. I was there for 2 or 3 years. I set the program up. Everything seemed to be working really, really well. And I thought, I have got the secret sauce. This is how to be a CISO. And got a little bit arrogant with it and then moved into a completely different vertical, completely different company culture, and tried that cookie cutter approach and fell flat on his face. And he lasted 5 minutes. And he kind of picked himself off the sidewalk and shook himself down and went, but I don't understand. Because it worked there, it should have worked here. And completely missed the fundamental point you absolutely said, is that no two organisations are the same. No two types of outcome are the same, and no characteristic requirements are the same. So we have to be highly, highly adaptive as we move from role to role.
Wow.
And just not recognise that there is not a textbook that says this is how to do security leadership. Does not exist.
Wow. And can you imagine this level of insight already in an introduction of Paul? We have not even gone to the topics, Paul. So
we're going to run out of stuff to talk about at this rate.
Yeah, this is excellent. Really appreciate you sharing the personal things as well, Paul, of what has been redefining for you, especially in your professional, I would say field, but also personal field as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe good for the listeners as well. We're going to dive deeper into the conversation of what the NextGen CISO is. Let's start there, Paul, really in an introduction topic. What is the NextGen CISO and what sets them apart from traditional CISOs?
So that's a really interesting question, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, because I've been thinking about this concept of next generation versus traditional. And actually, I see it more as an evolution. And feel free to you challenge me if you don't agree. But I'd like to talk about the evolution of the security role, and to kind of bring that to life a little bit. Let me talk about the journey that we've been on. So for the vast majority of us, we came from a technology background. We're technologists.
Agreed.
And you know how this used to work. We used to walk into our buildings, walk into our data centers, go through that physical security frontier that we controlled. We'd go up to our cabinets, our data cabinets, and we'd cuddle the tin, and we knew what was running on everything, and we could enumerate, and we felt in control. But then the world moved on. We made technology easier to consume, but we started to consume technology in a different way. So cloud is a great example of that. Mm-hmm. So we now operate in a world where the technology and the services and the capabilities that we use are very amorphous. And more importantly, we now recognize that what we're trying to protect is more than just the technology. And we talk quite flippantly about the importance of people and process and technology. But we came from a place where we were predominantly interested in just the technology. Now, the consequence of that is that the balance of technical and non-technical skills that security leaders possess has started to shift. So when I first started doing security leadership duties, it was highly technical, very technical. That was the bulk of my work. And occasionally I'd go and talk to the board and so on and so forth. But as I've moved through my journey, and it'd be interesting to get your perspectives on that, I've seen the balance has really, really started to shift. And I've had to do a lot more in the business side than I used to in the technical side. And what that's meant is I've had to take, difficult decisions for myself, because technology is my passion as well. But to be an effective security leader, I've had to leave some of that behind, because my focus now has to be on what the business needs. That intersection of security and cost and risk and controls and business agility, and how all of that largely contributes to business strategy. And the other thing that security leaders of today have to worry about is they can't live in the now. We can't be reactionary security leaders anymore. We have to observe things on two planes. We have to worry about the challenges of today, what's going on today in the next hour, the next 24 hours. But we also have to look at the future as well. We have to almost predict where these bumps in the road are going to come at us, but not just say, AI is coming and quantum is coming, we've got to contextualize that and answer that so what question, and then think about what that so what means to what my business is trying to do. So all of these things have kind of led the security leader to not become a next generation. I don't think it's a generational step. I see it more as an evolution. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? What do you think?
No, I think you're very spot on to phrase it like this, Paul. And I really like the drivers you've mentioned, right? Forcing the CISO for this evolution. It's again not only a technological problem, because we are getting so much under attack as companies. Like the scale of attacks has increased over the last years as well, and the ways these attacks happen has increased as well, including if we just include cyber warfare as part of the way companies are being attacked as well. So naturally, if something is as a risk is occurring more often in an organization, the risks are bigger. Naturally, senior management gets more involved in decision making and managing that risk as well. So once a CISO has spoken to senior management, right, which nowadays is quite normal, I would say, Paul, but I can imagine like 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, that would not be that normal. Then I guess business executives and IT executives would definitely come back and keep having that conversation with a CISO. Now you have to elevate your game as a CISO and not only talk about the problems we have now, the technological problems we have now, but also where is the business heading at? Where is IT heading? So I am in completely agreement with you. This is where I see the change of the role of CISO happening. Jeroen, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we're an incredibly young field, right? So, I mean, CISOs, how old is the CISO function in itself? It's not that old. And I think if you are in a leadership position, if you want to be successful, you have to be able to talk to the rest of your peers. It doesn't really matter if you know everything about logistics and warehousing, or if you know everything about how to make a, computer chip. If you're not able as a leader to talk, for example, to a CEO or to a CFO, and you just talk numbers, for example, you're the financial director of something, and you just talk about numbers and not what it means in the context of your organization, you're going to fail in that role as well. And it doesn't really matter in what area the company you are working for. So as a CISO, I think it's key that you can talk to other people who are responsible in the company and tell them what it means to them. And how they can help you run an effective security program, but also how you, with your security program, can enable them to do their business, how to keep financial records safe, how to keep intellectual property safe. I think we're forced to change into NextGen CISO or not so traditional CISO by the changes in the demand that's happening. But also developing ourselves to become more successful, because you won't become successful if you're just talk about SQL injection, remote code execution, so true, lateral movement. They're like, okay, who's this kid?
I think over time we've had to force ourselves to become quite broad-minded.
Yes.
Let me kind of paint a bit of a picture of this. So if we were solely focused on risk management, so they hired you and you said, right, I'm just going to manage risk to tolerance. And in 30 years of working in IT, no one's ever been able to properly describe what the word tolerance means, but that's a different conversation altogether. But let's just say that I'm on a crusade to expunge all risk from my organisation and manage that to almost a point of near zero. All risk is bad, and we can argue the ramifications of that because we know that's not entirely accurate. But let's just go with that. And I'm in role for 18 months, 2 years, and I walk into the boardroom and I say, this company now has no risk. Pat me on the head. Aren't I a good little CISO? And the board turns around and says, you utter moron. I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, well, we're a 2-year-old company. We are hell-bent. Our short-form strategy is on exponential growth, speed to market. We are prepared to trip over our shoelaces to establish a foothold in a highly competitive industry. Yes. We now can't navigate because we are so inundated with control that you put in that we cannot meet our growth targets and we are now a laggard and we are falling behind and we are failing in our strategy and it's all your fault. And that is the moment of realization when you say, if I do my job in isolation from the other people in the boardroom, I can do a good job and I can still fail. And that is very important. And that's
So
why
true,
we
so
talk
true.
about that interrelationship between outcome and business value and all of these different component parts of the boardroom construct, from finance to operations and everything in between.
Excellent. I really like this. Is so true. I would say, Paul. I'm really happy you're bringing that up. Maybe I can take a different angle at it as well and just step it one notch up, Paul. Like there's a whole debate happening, giving the CISO a position in the board, right? That discussion. Like, what is your take on that, Paul? Like, do you see? Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot on that.
Irfan, also ask him to what other C-level does the CISO need to report, like CFO, CTO, CEO?
Solve the governance problem. Where should the CISO be reporting at? The NextGen CISO be reporting.
Is that the time I really need to go? This is one of the most divisive. Whenever we go to, and I'm sure you gents do as well, you go to a peer networking event, and this question always comes up: should the CISO have a seat on the board? Yeah. It's one of the most divisive things that we have debated over all the years I've been in security leadership, and I talk about this in the third paper. For what it's worth, I'll give you a view, my view, and argue, because there's no right answer here. I actually think that the security leader being on the board would be detrimental to our capacity to advise and guide and support business outcome. The reason why I say that is, on the one hand, it's very easy to say, well, look, if I'm on the board, I've got all of the CXO on speed dial. I'm one of the inner circle. I can shortcut all of these governance and protocols and everything. If I need a swift reaction, that's all great. And I can get involved and I can challenge and support the mandate and yada, 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 yada. Yeah, it's all a marriage of convenience. Because once you are on that board, you now have executive responsibilities which put you in immediate conflict with the values of security leadership, because we are there to be a critical friend, to provide impartiality, to challenge and critique, to be a bit of an ombudsman. And I think in order to do that, that conflict of interest is actually very, very dangerous. So I think that actually the best place for a security leader is to be sat outside of that circle with independence and impartiality, be supported by effective instruments and models of governance that allow those decisions to be challenged and critiqued in an effective and constructive way, whilst remaining a trusted advisor of the board. And I just don't see how you can do that when you are being conflicted. If your bonus is being paid by management of profitability, and you're saying, well, I don't want to eat into that margin and that profit by spending more on security. Conflict. So I struggle with that. The other thing I would say is when you look at things like the motivations of the Securities and Exchange Commission and you see their behaviours stateside where they're trying to hold boardrooms to account for their knowledge and understanding of cybersecurity, in much the same way we did with financial information back in the Sarbanes-Oxley days, back in the 2000s. I think history is just kind of repeating itself, that regulators now recognise that boardrooms cannot repudiate their responsibility for understanding the importance of security and risk management. But I think by putting us in that inner circle, they will still have an opportunity to discharge those responsibilities and make me the responsible person. And I just don't think that's right. Now, there will be arguments to the contrary, but that's where I stand on it.
So, Paul, are you saying the SEC, the way they are governing through policies of companies taking cybersecurity information security more seriously, that's the right way? That's what you're seeing. It's just making the whole board responsible for it, and then it will delegate basically on a level lower, or maybe even several level lowers. So that's a model you think it's a more, I would say, advantage model, modern model, compared to blurring the lines, putting the CISO at the board level, and then having those conflict of interest positionings over there as well.
Yeah, I think the board needs to be held to account. Now, the board, boardrooms can be quite insular places, right? They don't like to be. They don't like to feel exposed. They don't like to feel exposed by a lack of knowledge. Equally, sometimes it can be quite handy to be able to play that card of plausible deniability. And I'm not suggesting that that's a predominant motivation, but it must factor and it must feature. We've tried very hard for some time to help our boardrooms sharpen their knowledge in cybersecurity, and it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle, and it's taken black swan events like global pandemics and supply chain disruptions and ransomware proliferation to really hammer home that these are business damaging things that need to be considered both tactically and strategically. The question that the security leader will always ask is, how can I help? But also thinking about the marketability and the value of our proposition in terms of how the business can achieve those outcomes. Done well, security can unlock opportunities for more efficiency, more opportunity to create and protect and enable business value. And I think that just needs to be done with a degree of impartiality. What some boardrooms are taking to is they're appointing non-executive directors who have this competency and knowledge and understanding, and they're augmenting their inner circle with that. Yep. And that allows and releases the security leader, the incumbent within the organisation, to act with that impartiality and independence. Yep. And I think that there's some value in that.
Agreed. Well, we're going to touch on this one in a section later, because I will also want to get your views, Paul, on, we're talking about the NextGen CISO, but how does that compare to the NextGen board, right? Because we are seeing that boards are struggling with understanding the information security risk and problems. And there's something to say about them. There's something to say about the NextGen or the CISO itself, that he or she needs to be able to bring that message across to the board effectively as well. So we're going to dive a level deeper then. For now, I just want to go to the section of tips and tricks as well. Practical things, Paul. If you have CISOs or aspiring CISOs that want to develop themselves into that evolution of being that next-gen CISO, what is it that they can do starting from tomorrow? And I'll break it down in a couple of areas, right, Paul? So we have discussed it is so important for security initiatives to be aligned with business objectives, right? It's there. You're there also not to keep the organization safe, but make sure that organization is able to multiply the business IT in a way where security is not putting handcuffs on the organization, but it's allowing risk management to happen in a very consistent and conscious way. So the question I have for you, what approach would you recommend to next-gen CISOs or CISOs in general, I would say, to align information security initiatives with business objectives? How can they go practically about it?
I think this is a great question. And the first thing I would say is just reset a mindset. First thing is, if you think all risk is bad, stop thinking like that. See risk managed as an opportunity. And so start there. That's the first thing I would say. And that helps your head move out of that mindset of it's all about governance, risk, compliance and assurance, which is important, but it's not the be all and end all. What's the most important thing that you can do? I would say take time to learn your business and get your teams to do the same. There is something to be said about putting yourself in the business's shoes. I talk to a lot of security leaders and they say, I can't, excuse me, I can't engage with the business. They don't understand me and yada, yada, yada. And I say, well, when was the last time you went and spent some time in the business? And they said, well, I haven't got time to do that. I'm too busy going from meeting to meeting and like risk meetings and this and that and the other. I said, well, you don't have an emotional connection to your organisation. Now, there's a good opportunity to do this, and it's that kind of first 90 days into 6 months, that honeymoon period. But I would also say that this is something that you need to do continuously. And I eat my own dog food. If you search LinkedIn, you'll find a picture of me dressed up as a pizza delivery person. There's pictures of me in high visibility clothing out in the middle of the night talking to my colleagues on the railway. It's important to understand, because when you understand, you empathise, and when you empathise, it helps you read the room. It helps you have a rapport with your business, and it helps you understand what the business is trying to do, tactically and strategically, and then work backwards. And it kind of comes back to this whole marketing thing. Yep. So how do I add value to that? there are things that we must do. The law compels us to do particular things. The regulations compel us to do particular things. But everything else is within our gift to change and adapt and shape and form. And it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. You've got to recognise where the organisation is at any point in time. If you're a startup, it's all about agility. And that can be quite uncomfortable for a lot of security leaders, because with agility comes a bit of a loss of control, a little bit of flying by the seat of your pants. And in order for that to be effective, you've got to be close to the wheelhouse. You've got to be tuned in with what's going on and be a little bit more broad-minded. If you're a more mature organisation, or if you are heavily regulated, then you're going to see the world much more through a regulatory lens. But that doesn't mean that there is opportunity outside of that to do things differently, to better support the business need. There is a reason why the security leadership cohort is starting to see the introduction of business information security officers. And this is another evolution of security leadership, where we have people who are practitioners like all of us, but we see the business first, and we see the tradecraft of security secondary, and we use security to help solve business problems. And these roles are proving massively effective to organisations, because you're starting to see a connection and a relationship between the language of business and the language and practicalities of security.
Yeah, and the connection, Paul, ultimately the connection of people.
Yeah.
It's driving and implementing whatever, whether it's analytics, whether it's AI, whether it's even revenue processes. It's about changing the organization, and those changes happen through people, right? So if you're not able to empathize with your business leader, your IT leaders, they will have the feeling, this person doesn't understand me. Why should I spend time with this person? There's nothing for me to gain over here. So I think it's spot on what you mentioned. It's all about developing that empathy, so you're able to connect with your business leader and IT leaders. Jeroen, what do you think?
Yeah, it's exactly the reason why I currently have 2 CISOs in my team. Yeah. I think they are key to the success of the CISO office that we have. They are there to build relations. They are there to understand the business. And that doesn't mean that I, as a CISO, don't need to understand the business. I need to understand the business first and foremost. The more and more I talk to CISOs, or am in that position myself, I come to the realization that I'm actually not in the security business. And that's really weird for me to say as a CISO. Right? So I'm in the business. Business. I'm helping, enabling our business to do whatever they want to do securely. Yeah. And with the appropriate level of risk, as Paul mentioned. So it takes us almost full circle back to the introduction that we have. But I think it's key for roles like CISOs, BISOs, definitely security architects and enterprise security architects, to understand the context that they are working in. So if you look, for example, we just hired two new people. Their first month, maybe 2 months, is just getting to know people, setting up relations, understanding what we do as a company. That's their first 2 months. It's not risk analysis. It's not business impact analysis. It's not all that. It's just get to know people. It's really key to what you said.
It's really key. Really key what Paul said. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I would add actually is turning that on ourselves. So something that we haven't talked about yet, and I'll just surface it now, is as a security leader, I've seen this job get harder and harder and harder. And I've seen my work hours go up and up and up. And I've seen the challenges become more complex and more complex. Now, the board now starting to recognise the existential threat of cybersecurity is looking at the security leader and saying, this is you. You're on top of all of this, right? Now, I've worked in multinationals, I've worked in small organisations. Now, if you take a big multinational, but particularly, in a time of crisis, let's take the pandemic for an example, there is no way that I can see and hear everything that is going on in my business. Yet, there is an expectation from our boardrooms that we are across everything. And what that kind of causes me to think is we need to revisit the target operating models that we have for security within organizations, particularly large-scaled organizations. And one of the things that BISOs do is, number one, dispersal. So it gives you a better reach across your business. But two, visibility, but visibility with bandwidth. So rather than you as the security leader trying to see across 35,000 people operating in 90 countries, you have people within that community dispersed in the business who are acting as your eyes and ears, allowing you to manage and govern a little bit by exception, because actually those people at skip level are keeping the day job, keeping those real-time plates spinning. And the fundamental important thing there is not only does it give us room to breathe and occasionally have the odd lunch, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yep. But it also gives us time to think and strategize, which is something that a lot of security leaders crave. And they find that the only time they have to think or strategize is either when they're standing in the shower first thing in the morning, thinking, here we go again, or they're thinking and strategizing whilst their wife or husband or partner is trying to have a conversation with them, which then means that they are disengaged with their personal lives, which creates other problems. And if you've read the Nominet study, is quite a good one actually back in 2020. It talks about the personal and relationship challenges that security leaders are having because we just can't unplug because there's just too much to do. So, you know, BISOs is one way to solve this, but that dispersal of that operating model into organizations that are now trying to be also dispersal, self-autonomous and agile, we've got to change the way we structure and organize ourselves as well. We're going to burn out, and we are burning out.
Agreed. I think Paul, this is also going back to, you know, what you talked about initially, and I think you really nailed it in the intro. At least for me, that's where I had my aha moment, is saying that it's an evolution of the CISO role. And what I have seen with quite some CISOs that I've spoken with Paul is saying, hey, I want to do this, but my agenda is already full. It is really firefighting every time for me, except, you know, of me being proactively reaching out to my stakeholders. And I do think to the certain extent that is true. But on the other hand, I also think it's these CISOs being there in their comfort zone as well. And they're staying there. It's so difficult for them to make that leap again, to say, this is not where I should be spending my time only. I should evolve in the new role. So what are the tips and tricks you would give these CISOs to make it practical for them? Measuring that they are evolving from, you know, probably their comfort zone where they were at as CISO to probably the next level, Paul.
Wow. Let's see. There's quite a
made him
bit,
think.
Really. The one thing I would say, and this is a difficult thing to say out loud, and you know,
it's sensitive.
It can be sensitive. But as the security leadership role has evolved, as has its balance of needs and wants and requirements, and being a CISO isn't for everybody. You know, when I talk to people and I say, what's your career aspirations? I go, I want to be a CISO. And I say, be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Because there's a couple of things I've observed through my career. Being a CISO can sometimes be very lonely. Do not underestimate the power of community, because sometimes when you want to have a rant or event, you need to be reaching across the ISF membership, or you need to be talking to your professional networks, and you need that. It's vitally important. But you also need to take a good look in the mirror and think about who you are, what motivates you, and what makes you happy. I'll take you back to the example of my late father. He loved working with cars. He felt compelled and cajoled and was pushed into becoming a manager, a senior manager and an executive. But in his heart, he knew he didn't really want to be that person, which is why he would escape when he was sick and tired of the office and the whiteboard, and you know, he'd run off to a depot, grab a van, and do what made him happy. Now, his workforce thought that was fantastic, and as we know, you know, the ability to roll up your own sleeves and muck in and be one of the team is very powerful. Not rather than sit behind a closed door in your ivory tower. That's very, very important. But you've also got a job to do. So you've got to get that balance right. So if you find yourself, as you said, you know, going back to your safe space of hiding in the SOC, poring over data, because you're avoiding the conversation with the board and you're avoiding the business conversations, then maybe there's a different type of role for you in security. And we are so lucky that we've got a very embryonic and new tradecraft. There are so many different roles out there for people to have a prosperous and happy career in cybersecurity. Yeah. It might not necessarily be the right role. So think about it through selfish eyes as well. Think about what you want.
Be honest with yourself, what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, be honest with yourself. Yeah. It's not for everybody. That said, I love it. I absolutely love it. But you know, we're all different. We're all different. The other thing that I would say is recognize the diversity of the skill set that is required in an evolutionary security leader. You need a balance of business and technical skills. And you need to recognize that it is a bit of a cliche, but every day is a school day when you do this job. Every day, every single day, I learn something different. The day you think you know it all is the day that you will be caught out, because you have to recognize that propensity and that need to continue to learn and continue to develop. And that is technical and non-technical skills. But as I said earlier, the ratio of that is starting to change. We talk a lot about security leaders burning themselves out. I think sometimes we bring that on ourselves a little bit because we struggle to let go of our darlings. You know, we want to put our arms around it all. We want to control it all. But the reality is the job is too big to do that. Employ people who are cleverer than you, who can take some of that off your shoulders so you have time to think and strategize, but also to learn and develop. Because the minute you stop doing that, your efficacy starts to decay over time. Equally, you'll live longer because you just can't do 90-hour weeks over and over and over again. You know, there's more to it, but, you know, let me throw it back to you. You know, they're the sorts of things that you need to think more broadly about the role and what that means to you as an individual. What are your thoughts on that?
No, for me, I don't have anything to add, Paul. I think we really hit on this. I do. There is one emphasis, and I want to just add on it, Paul, is I don't think that's different for being a CISO, CFO, CRO, or CEO in that sense. I think first most of all, you have to take care of yourself, right? As a professional, I think, you know, make sure you get that balance in your life, in your professional career. I wouldn't call it a private and professional balance. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking care of yourself. Yeah. So that is one thing I would love CISOs, if they are not doing that yet, to still pay attention to make sure they are balanced as an individual. Because if you're not balanced, you're not going to be able to sustain being balanced to your team, to be sustainably balanced to your board and to your other executives where, you know, you have to help, where you have to be that conscious to them. So I think for me, the key thing over here would be to still make sure that, you know, they are able to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Specifically when you're like in a leadership function, you carry a lot of responsibility or accountability even, and that can drive you to work like 60, 80, 90 hours a week.
With a lot of pressure, right?
With a lot of pressure, so you need to take care of yourself. Yeah. I think also that we in the information security field, at least a lot of people that I talk to, have that responsibility syndrome or that protection syndrome. They really do it because they want to protect bad things from happening, whether that's as a I don't know, police officer or maybe a doctor or in the field of information security. I just try to look inwards to myself. I do it a lot because I find the need to protect an organization or a person against a threat. That's why I do it. And
it's an existential threat, which we think we need to do something with it.
Yeah, so that's why I held myself accountable, responsible to work a lot, and sometimes neglect my own mental or physical well-being.
Balance, yes.
So, and I think a lot of people have that in our field. Yeah. I think it's key that when you are applying for a CISO job, that, like Paul said, we are from a different cloth. Like it's not for everybody, right? CISO is not for everybody, and you should really need to understand what you're getting yourself into in the interviews. It's not about the salary. It's more about span of control. How many people do you have working for you in the team or with you in the team? How are their knowledge levels? How long have they been active in the company? What assets are you trying to protect? It's more what are you getting yourself into, and then you should make a decision if you want to take on that CISO position.
There's something to add. I completely agree with all that. By the way, just you'll find this amusing, and I know the listeners won't be able to see this, but that's my escape over my shoulder. I've started. It might be a midlife crisis, but I've started to learn to DJ.
Oh wow!
There we go.
Because I like music is my thing, and I love watching how people do this. And I thought, how hard can it be? I need to learn. That's my escape. I realised at one point that and I think my wife spelt this out to me. She said, "All you do is tech and cyber. What else are you?" And I kind of realised that I was almost shutting out the rest of Paul Watts, because that was all about me. I love my tech. I mean, behind the camera, I've got a farm of Raspberry Pis. There's tech everywhere. It drives my wife absolutely insane. But I realised I needed a way to switch off and just vacate the technology room for a bit. And okay, you could argue that there's a bit of technology in here, but that allows me to explore my creative side.
Yeah.
I'm not very good, but I'm getting better. But the other thing I was going to add was we need to talk about the other side of this. And forgive me if you were going to ask me this question, but I just want to talk about the CXO that's looking to hire their next security leader or their next CISO. Because I think this is very, very important, because a lot of mistakes are happening at the moment. The first thing I'd say is that the term CISO is being wholesale abused at the moment, completely abused. If you look at an average, you look at 5 jobs on LinkedIn and they say they're a CISO, and you pull them apart, they're not a CISO. Now, I ask myself the question, is the moniker being abused to try and recruit people at a time where, the supply and demand is all over the place? Or is it because the business doesn't really know what they want? And I had some thoughts about some advice here, and I actually wrote these down, bullet pointed, because I wanted to make sure I caught these. Sure. Don't ask for a shopping list of certifications, right? As I tell, one of the things I love doing from time to time, and the ISF is kind enough to let me do this, is spend some time talking to students. So I do some guest lecturing from time to time at some of the universities in the UK. And I say to them, your value will become a product of your knowledge and your experience. Just because you cram and pass the CISSP or the CISM or CEH or whatever it is, if you don't have the ability to impart that knowledge through experience, you're not valuable to me as a hiring manager. And that presents me with a problem, because I need boots on the ground right now. I've got a lot of work to be getting on with. But equally, as an industry, we have to create the environments for graduates to learn. So we as an industry have got to get that balance right. We can't ostracize and leave those people behind. That's quite important. But as a CXO looking to hire a security leader, it's not about those certifications. If you don't know what you want, that's a red flag. Go and ask for help. Don't just say I need like 400 certifications. That's just ridiculous. And we see right through that. Yeah. We're not going to come and work for you if you do that. Don't just lean on the compliance stuff. That's a massive red flag. If that is your unconscious bias, we know that you probably don't have an open mind and see security through anything more than that. And we see a massive hill to climb, and that's a potential red flag. Doesn't mean it's not insurmountable, but we would see that.
Agreed.
If you refer to us as IT security, or I need a phishing guy, or anything like that, that is a narrow-minded deficit in your understanding of what it is you want your CISO to do, and that's a red flag. What you need to do is take a big step back and think about what it is that you are trying to achieve. And if you don't know, you haven't quite worked that out, maybe you need to think about talking to or engaging an interim person in role, or speaking to a consultancy organisation that can help you understand and qualify that out. Because otherwise, all that's going to happen, we have a problem with tenure and we have a problem with retention of security leaders. The average tenure is still very, very low. It doesn't survive a business strategy cycle. And that's frustrating both for us and for our businesses. If we come in and we realise that actually you haven't got the first faintest idea what you're trying to do, you're not making the budget available.
We are not joining you. We're not joining you.
We're going to go.
Yeah.
We're going to move. We're going to leave. We're going to go elsewhere. You just have to recognise that. The other one is, don't expect your talent acquisition team to be able to do this through a boilerplated specification that they pick up of what they think a CISO is. this is now very much an executive hire.
Agreed.
You know, notwithstanding the fact on the board or off the board, there's no right answer there, as we talked about earlier. But it's an executive hire. You need to know that you are hiring somebody who is bought into the culture, the spirit, the values, and the ethos of the organization, and have the capacity and propensity to roll with that and provide value through the tradecraft of security. And if you're not exploring that during the interview cycle, you're going to end up with a mismatch. And the final thing I would say is, CISOs can be quite expensive. You know, it's a high salary role, but you're paying for years of experience and knowledge and yada yada. I'm just selling us.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Paul.
But the investment goes beyond that, because if I go into an organization and I sketch it out, I do a baseline maturity assessment, I look at strategic intentions, I work out what the gap is, and I come up with a year plan and a 3-year plan, it's going to require investment in time, in money, and in people. If you're not prepared to do that, if you think hiring the CISO is the signal you need to send your investors to say, we take security really, really seriously, and we've hired a CISO, red flag.
Red flag, exactly.
Because we alone can't change the world.
No.
We would die trying if we even attempted it, and we know that we are not prepared to burn ourselves out anymore. Yep. So you've got to be looking at all of these things when you're thinking about your hire.
We didn't touch upon all the questions, but there are answers that you have given that I'm pretty sure has answered all of the questions that we did ask, Paul. So having said that, thank you so much, Paul, for all the precious insights into the NextGen CISO. What we normally do, Paul, we'll ask you offline to send us a list of sort of recommended resources. Think about your papers that you're writing, and other sort of research that's being done, or content, video content, audio content that's available for our listeners to read, listen, and watch. So it helps them and supports them in their journey to become the NextGen CISO as well, or either stay there relevant as a NextGen CISO. And I will use all these resources to post them on our show notes of our episode, Paul. So once again, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Jeroen, anything to add from your side? And then we can
thank you so much, Paul, for joining us and giving so much valuable insights into the role of a CISO, whether that's NextGen CISO or just new modern CISO or just CISO. Thank you so much. I truly enjoyed this.
No worries. Thanks for having me. And, let's talk again soon.
Yeah.
Lot to cover.
Wow, Jeroen, it's really nice to also speak to folks that have been CISOs, because I could feel in the episode that a lot actually resonated with you and me. We could completely follow his thought process. I'm actually quite curious what your key takeaways were from this episode, from this conversation with Paul.
I found a lot of it recognizable to my own journey within 20 years of security, right? So started out from technical, was fairly successful at it, but at sometimes you reach your limits, right? That's it. And it's not about the next promotion, or it's not about, you just notice that you not become very successful in your job if you just focus on the tech stuff. Yeah. So I recognized that journey where I talked a lot more business, thought a lot about the business, and came to the realization that security isn't security, it's business. You enable them to do business in a secure way, to keep the assets or to protect the assets that they want to protect. And it also fueled my realization that I think we as security professionals should be more in a facilitating, enabling role, providing services. I don't care if it's like a secret manager that you're as a service, so that they can protect their secrets better, or whether that's MPC, multi-party computation, or it doesn't really matter, right? You're in the field of providing them a service so that they can do just what they need to do in a secure way. So that is nice to hear Paul say that. Contradicts with a little bit, I think, with being the NextGen CISO. And I love the fact that we touched on the more mental well-being or the more physical well-being of you as a leader. And I think that is an overlooked topic that we might even want to address at some point in a special episode.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea.
How about you?
No, if I have to summarize the episode and condense it to my key takeaways, it is revolving around the word leader.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not about information security. It's not about tech. It's about being a leader.
Yes.
And all the attributes that we would need to be a leader, whether you're a financial leader, whether you're a operational leader, it doesn't matter. No. It's what we expect you to have, even as a CISO.
Yeah, it was a great insight, right?
Yeah, exactly,
really
exactly. Insight. So it's about leadership, and there are a few attributes that it's a must to have to be that leader. Yep. And all these attributes were touched upon during the episode. So for me, I'm not going to go into repeating them, but it's about leadership.
Yeah.
And we as a CISO, we cannot ignore that anymore because our CXOs are demanding that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Reinvent Security. We appreciate you taking the time to tune in and explore the world of information security with us. In case that you've missed any details or want to deeper dive into resources we discuss, we'll make sure it is available out there as part of the show notes. You'll find other social media links and channels and resources that we have recommended by our guests. So please make sure you take a look at the show notes. We are also always looking for your input. If you have any specific questions or if there's any sort of dream guest you would love to hear from in our episodes, shoot us a message on LinkedIn. Your suggestions will fuel our curiosity for sure. Don't forget to subscribe to Reinvent Security podcast on your favorite podcast players to stay updated with the latest episodes. Your ongoing support means everything to me, and we really mean this, by the way. It's not just a marketing statement. We'll be back next month with another exciting episode. Until then, take care, stay curious, and we'll look forward to having you with us again. Ciao, ciao, and bye.